the Enterprise Digital Podcast with Ian and Barclay Ray, navigating the ever-expanding service management maze.
Hello and welcome to the Enterprise Digital Podcast once more. This is episode a big number. We've been doing this for years now. Never managed to find a way out of this virtual space here. But I'm Barclay Ray and I'm still here gibbering away. I'm joined as ever by Ian. Ian, how are you doing today?
Hello. Yeah, very well, thank you. Very good.
Are you gibbering or...
I'm in a reasonably confident, good mood today, so I think all is well in the world.
Stuff. Well, we have a really good guest today. We're going to talk a little bit about stuff, but before we do that, once more onto the break, we always talk about some kind of trivia that you have spent hours, days, researching and looking through over the last week or so. Do you have trivia with you today, Ian?
Of course I do. Yes, of course I do. This week's trivia, I just thought you might be mildly interested, Barclay, in the world's longest running science experiment. The world's longest running science experiment. Did you know the University of Queensland, an ex-customer of mine once upon a time, University of Queensland have been running now an experiment for 98 years. 98 years. An experiment which is referred to as the pitch drop experiment, where pitch, which is the world's most thickest liquid, it's 100 billion times more viscous than water, 100 billion times more viscous than water.
Like Guinness, yeah?
Like think of it, it looks like Guinness. It looks a little bit much thicker. And it has been put in a glass funnel back in the 1920s, 1927. It was put in a glass funnel and the bottom of the funnel was opened and it has been dripping out at the rate of one drip every 8 years for the first 40 years. And then it slowed down when they introduced air conditioning. So it's even slower. The last drop fell in 2014. And everybody's eagerly awaiting the next one, which is due to fall sometime this decade. Now, you can watch it. The thing I love, there's a website. There's a webcam, and you can watch the pitch drop experiment live anytime you like and watch that sitting. And it's a great thing. Glass bowl, cylinder inside, or a shape inside with a thick black liquid and a ball hanging from the bottom of it. The pitch drop experiment, 98 years old. How about that?
And the point of this is?
Yeah, I tried to find out. Like many of my trivias, you always ask that question, what's the point? And
it's the why, you know.
This one.
Why do we do this, you know?
Yeah, this one doesn't achieve anything. This one is purely for the purpose of showing just how slowly this flows. It's set up as a demonstration only. It's a demonstration experiment rather than trying to prove anything. It's purely to show you how slowly pitch moves. You think some of your questions take a long time to come out, Barclay? Some of your questions on the podcast are quite long and slow. They're not as slow as pitch.
Well, I'm touched that I'm even mentioned in the same sentence as such a strong substance, put it that way. One thing that was occurring to me there was, you know, the pace of the way some organizations work, and universities are kind of known for being a little bit slow to move. But, you know, you go and you work for a, I don't know, bank or something, or a retail organization that's been around for decades or maybe even a couple of 100 years. And sometimes I've been at universities where it's been like, yeah, we've had the same process for the last 800 years. I mean, we have, because we've been in business for that amount of time. And it's just going to take a while to change. You know, it's a bit like the pitching. When the next drop comes, that's our next change window. That's our next opportunity to do something differently. Anyway, talking about things that are thick and viscous, myself, of course. No, I was gonna introduce our guest, but I
Yeah.
was being very rude about it. We're joined today by Stephen Mann.
Hello, Steve.
He's neither thick nor viscous, and he's very intelligent.
No, it's Friday afternoon, so that's
Really?
right.
Illuminating, things will come forth from you quickly and effectively and intelligently. So hopefully that's the case. Stephen, thank you for joining. Great to have you on again. You've been on before, and it's really nice to have you back on. To the person who's been sitting in that room for the last 98 years, who doesn't know what's going on in the world apart from the pitch experiment, tell the world a little bit about who you are and what you do, etc. Briefly.
Sure. I mean, you could say that I need to do a self pitch, really, couldn't you? But
Very good.
it was one of the two things that came to mind when Ian was talking about pitch. Well, no, three, because I thought of opera singers.
I thought it was sound as well when he said it.
Yeah. But one thing, sorry, you know me, I digress, which is what I'm doing. Can't even say it admirably now. You know, you mentioned it was the aircon.
Yes.
Just the weight of the pitch above the pitch that's stripping not impacted at all.
The weight of the pitch impacted.
Yeah.
Even into
Let me show my ignorance through physics here, but I just wondered if the more pitch that's in there.
you need to ask the people doing the experiment.
It was just a thought. Anyway, moving on swiftly.
We have always little time where we're listening on the planet. So that particular question may not be prioritized, certainly not in mine. It's not on my blog, put it that way. So you're going to say who you were anyway. You digressed with fascinating interjection.
I used to say that I write about ITSM. I now write less about ITSM because people tend to use the technology to reconstitute what has already been written about ITSM. So a lot of the time now is spent talking about ITSM, well, until the technology does the talking about ITSM, looking at people's survey results and writing reports. Yeah, so still very much in the same space, trying to help people through IT service management or knowledge of IT service management. Slightly different these days, though, because I don't write blogs like I used to, which is a shame, but soapbox away.
There's lots of good stuff coming out of ITSM.tools still regularly, which is where we know that you are housed and that you produce some great content from regularly for the industry. So today, I think we're going to talk a little bit about different aspects of the sort of vendor side of things and the market a little bit, and innovation and so on. Great to have you on. Let's before we start our conversation, let's pause and have a caramel wafer and a glass of grapefruit cocktail. I'm never going to say chamomile tea because I hate it.
Okay.
We're introduced, we're ready to go. I'm going to start with Ian, actually, because Ian was talking a little bit about innovation, and then we can go into that. Yeah, you were mentioning that there's as ever, there's new innovation happening. Sorts of things have you spotted of late that are going on in this that caught your eye, Ian?
Yeah, I think this is an interesting change in the force, disruption in the force. We don't usually talk about vendor announcements. I know we're going to talk about vendor-y things a bit today. We're going to be circling around this. So it's quite timely to talk about a vendor announcement that came out over the last few days, which I have a little bit of background knowledge on because I used to work at Nexthing. And the guys at Nexthing are very, very clever people. I have nothing but respect for the team at Nexthing, and they recently introduced and announced a thing called Spark. And the reason I wanted to just bring this up is I think this is quite significant. I have no skin in the game, moved to semi-retirement after my time in Nexthing with nothing but good wishes. So I just think this is really interesting. So what is Spark? I would encourage people to just take a little look at this. What's been introduced
with the SDI conference?
Not to be, imagine you mush together, you smash together the vision of DEX, automated detecting and remediating, and the vision of the service desk and service management, communicating, helping, fixing, encouraging, making things right, and you mush them together. Effectively, what's been announced here is a conversational chatbot interface through the usual Teams and stuff like that, where an end user, an employee can chat with it and say, something's wrong with my computer. And what it does, and this is the really clever stuff, rather than saying, here's a knowledge base article, or I've created a ticket on the service desk for you, what this does is it actually looks at the configuration of your computer and the tools you're using in real time. It tells you what the problem is and it fixes it. So it actually takes the steps to fix it. I mean, the example they have on the website, my laptop's slow, can you help me fix it? Sure, let me have a look. I found the issue. Your memory usage is 85%. Would you like me to clear down the Chrome cache and stop processes? And the user says, yes, please. It says, okay, I've done that. It should be performing faster. Is it better now? And the employee says, yes, it is. And then it says, great. Well, I've logged this as ticket number 38237 and resolved it. And away you go. Now, to me, this is pretty significant because you no longer need to wait for somebody to pick up a ticket and respond to you. And you no longer need to read a knowledge base article. It's actually communicating and fixing. Now, maybe it's just me. I think this is a huge step forward for the industry.
It's just you, Ian. Is this then agentic DEX? Is that what that is?
Yeah, I mean, it's being positioned as a personal IT agent for every employee. It's agentic, yes. It's a form of self-service, but it's not asking the end user employee to do it themselves. It's properly providing real service. It's actually fixing stuff.
The challenge for me there is of course that, when it's something that can find and understand and fix, then that it doesn't need a person, but there'll be lots of things that it can't find and can't fix. And it's how we cross over from one to the other, the margins and you're still going to need a people.
And it's already really, you look in LinkedIn, some of the comments on there where people are playing with this and saying, there was one I read, I was sitting on the train and I'd been having a problem with my laptop. I got my phone out and I chatted with this and it fixed the issue on my laptop while I was using my phone. And it took up no human effort to do that. It's extraordinary. So I think it's a big shift. Chatbots are just chat. No good anymore.
Chatbots, I don't know. What do you think of this, Stephen? Is this something that you've come across or that you've thought about? Or
I mean, in some respects, we've been talking about self-healing for years, and I see it as a variant of that. And whilst Ian was talking about the capabilities, I thought two things. The first was the point you expressed, Barclay, that what happens when it can't answer it? Because to me, that's where I really struggle.
It should hopefully still create that ticket.
I mean, hopefully it should hand you over with all the information to a human being who can solve it. The only other thing was where we are with trust.
Yes.
Trust in AI. So they were the two things. Not only whether the IT organization that might want to employ this capability for the people that it serves, but also the people that it serves thinking, well, I sort of prefer it when Ian looks at my machine because Ian knows what he's doing. And I feel confident in his capabilities. So they're the only two things. I mean, I think I put it in a LinkedIn post the other day. I'm all for AI taking over some of these, I won't say simpler because they're not always simpler, but some of these tasks that are within its gift. But I do worry that we as people may have issues getting the most out of the technology.
Easy to deliver value is a really important part of what is to do. And trust, I think you're absolutely right with the trust point, where this sort of solution becomes successful when it can demonstrate and prove that it is effective at what it does. And then that trust is earned. The trust is earned as roll it out gradually and discover that it does live up to its up to its ambition. So hopefully that becomes clear.
And then a third thing that came to mind when you gave the train example, you say there's no human involvement, but there was a human on the phone.
No,
The person.
oh yeah,
Want of a better word.
yeah.
So what we don't know is how long they're on their phone for, using chat. And to me, one thing we need to be careful of, and it's very similar to the early days of self-service. I always go back to self-service, unfortunately, where people can spend more time trying to solve things themselves than speaking to someone who is gifted in that department. So that would be the only other thing that I guess the third thing I would worry about. That if there isn't the quick fix, but you continue to have to persist because you haven't been passed over to a person or a human that can take over. All we're doing is reducing costs in IT and passing them over to other business functions. So that'd be the three things I'd worry about off the top of my head. But I would say I'm all for it. We just have to make sure that we do it in a way that's not detrimental to business operations, business outcomes, all of that stuff. That we just need to make sure that IT isn't feathering its own nest with this technology that saves costs and hopefully improves efficiency. But we do these things with the wider context in mind.
It's definitely one to watch, I think, one to keep an eye on. I think the potential is really significant. I think seeing that rolled out at scale around the world across organizations providing IT value, that's the thing to watch and see if it makes that difference. But it's a big shift.
So just to sort of play that little last 5-10 minutes back, Ian, you mentioned something, a new technology advancement with great enthusiasm. I'm now looking at your face and it's just sort of grim because I and Stephen both kind of went, aye, it's okay, but, and we came up with all sorts of negative stuff about it. All in good taste, of course. Yeah. But there is that thing. I mean, what it's made me think is that, and you mentioned that word trust, which I think is really insightful, that we've got lots of stuff that keeps happening, new opportunities. And when do we actually take them on? We're talking about the ITSM industry. We've had basically a whole pile of vendors and products for years, the same ones that people were in and change around them and so on. But for years we said they're not used enough. We don't actually, so there's been points of innovation over the years where new things have come along. And, all over the last 10, 15 years, I can think of when we had, self-service, and then we had all the kind of service catalog idea, and then we had ways it starts to get bots, and then we had multi and omni-channel, and now we've got AI and so on, experience management, all these things that come in. And the question is the extent to which people actually take these things on and actually use them and get value from them.
Adoption is always the challenge to get to.
I suppose there's a couple of sides to it, and I'll just say my bit. It's not a question, it's just a long statement. But what I'll say is there's that sense of the vendors doing something and coming up with stuff, and do the users of that, do they understand how to make those things work, particularly in terms of what they need to have in place first? And we see a lot of this at the moment with, we're going to automate stuff. Well, we need to get our CMDB sorted and our knowledge management sorted and all these other things sorted first. Otherwise, we're just automating chaos. So there's the buyer side, and then they go out and buy something else new and shiny, and it goes around in a cycle. And then there's the other side, which is the vendors, is the extent. If you haven't banged on this drum for a while, but that one about to what extent do they really engage to help people really get value out of their products? And again, people go, oh, well, we can't get reports out, so we'll go and buy another tool. And it goes round and round. So that kind of innovation, excitement, trough of despair doesn't happen. It's not and then people get excited about something else new again. And how do we kind of pull that together so that we get good adoption of new ideas and we get continual positive improvement rather than kind of going round in cycles every so. That's all I'm going to for today. I'm going to shut up now.
Yeah, so it's all the words you've been allocated, but you used them all up on one introductory.
Them all, maybe not in the right order. But we have got a kind of cycle that just is very hard to break. And we get excited about things, and new stuff comes along. We get excited about that, and then we realize we haven't done the other stuff.
Yeah, I think it's incumbent partly on the vendors, and they know this, to make it easy to get to value, because they really do want adoption. They really do want their customers to use their tools and get value from them. It's a genuine desire, because then that means that customer stays with them, renews and subscribes, and all of these good things that make the business perform them to get that value. The trouble is you're often dealing with complicated technology and people that are busy doing other jobs. So you've got to find ways to make it easy for them to get to that value. The phrase, make the on-ramp easy, not too steep. But it is perennially a challenge, I think. I mean, Stephen, you must hear this sort of thing a lot.
Yeah, I was thinking one thing and then I thought of something else. So hopefully I'll say there's something else and then come back to the first thing. When you were talking about value realization, I couldn't help thinking, so you were saying adoption. And I was thinking, not no. The word here I would use is retention. And then you got round to retention. When I was chatting with Barclay earlier on, I didn't say it, but it was one of the many things that flew from one side of my mind to the other. I think we often struggle with the people that sell IT service management tools are different from those who retain customers for the ITSM tools. So you've probably got at least two different groups with two different sets of measures, and you can have a conflict as well as a left hand not necessarily knowing what the right hand is doing. I mean, that's probably an episode in itself, that. But the thing that I wanted to say before that popped into my mind was that I remember writing something, I think it was around about 2011, and it was a gross generalization, but it was something that I don't know whether I was seeing or feeling or smelling, but I couldn't get away from the fact that, again, it's a gross generalization, that a lot of IT organizations only improve their IT service management maturity or capabilities when they change IT service management tool.
Oh, interesting. So
yes. I was actually with you back in 2011, and so therefore I've not moved on from it. And I still think, again, it is a gross generalization, that it happens more often than we would like. So therefore, it becomes part of the IT service management tool churn, that you want to do something better. You want to adopt something that might be in the current tool, but you can't afford to do it, shall we say, whether that's effort or rules or financials. So therefore, you have a project to change your IT service management tool, and you add in everything you wanted to do with your old tool into the new tool. And you get the funding for that. So therefore, you can go on and you can improve your capabilities, and you get a new IT service management tool into the bargain. So that is, I say, whether it is the reality or not, I don't know, because I've never done any research, formal research into it. But that was what I think I realized back in 2011, and I've not seen anything since to change my mind, that we talk about continuing improvement or continual service improvement as was, but for the real changes to happen, for whether it be AI adoption or whether it be a reinvention of the service catalog or something else, that happens as part of the new tool implementation project rather than a continual improvement project or initiative or whatever you wish to call it. I could be completely wrong, but that's where I was 15 years ago. And I still think it now, because nobody has changed my mind yet.
I'd agree that I've seen many cases, maybe more recently than that support that. Not all of them, but many can.
Most generalization, it isn't everywhere, but I can't get away from the feeling that that is one of the, I don't know what I want to say impetus is. It doesn't sound like a real word. I got a feeling that's one of the reasons why IT service management tool churn is as high as it is, that there's that organizational change that is brought about, hopefully, through the technology change.
I'd say that I don't disagree with you. I'm seeing better adoption of continual improvement, continuous service improvement, because of some of the other tools as well, like what Ian's saying, and more awareness and monitoring, real time monitoring, and all that, and self healing, and all these things. So that I think there's more understanding of that. I do think that there is still that. There's so often we get asked to look at stuff, and it's like, well, we got to do this quickly. We've got a certain amount of time, and we've made a decision. And you don't even know if it's the right decision, but very little that you can do, and you end up with just a replacement, and then we'll build on it and we'll go, and then it doesn't really happen like that. I think more importantly, though, I think there is a lack of understanding of what's really involved in doing these projects. So that there are mistakes made on implementation that are relatively easy to avoid. And when we get that opportunity to go and sit with people and go, have you done this? Have you thought about that? Have you done that? And you'll be ahead of the game, ahead of the vendor. When they come in, you'll know better. You'll understand when they ask you a question, what the options are and what they mean. But particularly in terms of the structure of your data, because in 6 months, and you won't notice it at first if it's not right, because it's all just transactional. But then as you start to get reports coming out, you think, well, that's not what I wanted, or that's not what I expected. And it's like, well, that's the way you built it.
Whose mistake is that? If you're considering this, I want to avoid that mistake. Is that a mistake by the buyer, the customer? Is that a mistake by the vendor or
it's a bit of both, Ian. It's a bit of both. I mean, I think people I think they always underestimate it, and the buyers underestimate what's involved, and the fact that it's not, I always say to people, these are business applications. They're not technical systems really. And okay, some of the remediation and the deck stuff are technical systems, but the ITSM tools are business applications. So you need to have a organizational change going to do it. And you've got to think about people and buy-in, structure, and stakeholder management, and all that kind of stuff. It's not difficult, but it's just different from the way that a lot of people think about it. And when people are buying it, they think, well, we'll be able to do that we do it in 6 weeks. Well, maybe, but it's not going to be great. So there's that side of it. And then on the vendor side as well, they've got a different head on, which is, we won that, we want to get it in, we want to get up and running and move on. And unfortunately, in many cases, that is very short term. And you're talking about retention. I absolutely agree. And I wrote a blog a couple of years ago where I was quite cross about that. I was saying, vendors waking up, you'll actually retain better if you spend this time. Well, that's what they do. They don't actually do it. Sorry. The one thing I was going to say was, when I worked at Axis, when I had a team of, 60, 70 implementation consultants, there was about 3 or 4 of them that I would say that would be, I'm not being offensive to anybody, but there's a very small number of them that I would say would be in the kind of management consultancy, organizational change mode. The rest were all great technicians. They understood the product. They understood, even just how they engage with people. They would go in and say, right, well, yeah, we had the spec here. And then I went and I met with a customer, and the customer said, can you do it this way? And I would go, who was the customer? And it was like, it wasn't the person that had bought the system. It wasn't CIO or the operations or the service manager. It was like one of the technical managers saying, can we do this? And they would go, yeah, you can do that. And then before you know, you've got this month. So I think I don't think it's one party, but somewhere we need to get that kind of right. We need to do, we probably can't force the vendors to go down that path too much. I think we need to raise the awareness in the industry that people could just save themselves a lot of time and hassle if they just spent a bit more.
They recognise lifetime value much more. Now everything is subscription. You go back 2011, many things were a perpetual license. So really, the majority of your money is from that first sale, and then it's a diminishing return from there. But once you move to a subscription model, which is now the majority, whether cloud, SaaS, or even on-prem subscription, there's that recognition that it's really important that the customer's happy, because you're only getting a bit of the money at the beginning, and the rest of it's coming gradually. So you need them to be happy customers and reference customers, and you need to deliver that value. Go on, Steve.
Two other things. I mean, it's, even with on-premise software, you were still probably paying, or still people do it now, 17 to 20% of the license value each year. So it's still a healthy chunk of change. But the thought I had when Barclay was talking was, you made me think of AI guardrails, and everyone at the moment is focused on what are the AI guardrails for this IT service management tool. Which they could quite easily say, as well as those AI guardrails, what are value guardrails or success guardrails or implementation? What are the things that need to be in place to make sure that when we give you the money and you give us the service, that we get what we wanted or expected, which is related to value. So when Barclay said, I think it's a bit of both, I couldn't disagree, but I couldn't help think maybe vendors are missing a trick. And so, as we said earlier on, you've got sales and you've got the customer success team or retention team or whatever, that there's probably a way to knit them together better. And if you want to use the word guardrails or something else, but, surely there has to be a way to increase the potential for retention by ensuring that customers can't overpromise things.
I mean, this is the concept of, sorry, Stephen, this is the concept of the customer success manager, which is now a pretty established.
They evolved early on, though.
Yeah, well, in a good organization, very much so.
So there we're speaking to the customer before the salesperson.
Potentially. Sometimes they're introduced in an ideal situation during that first engagement. Yeah. So they get to know them. They understand where they're trying to get to. And in a way, I mean, you could say it's a way of judging the health of a vendor organization to explore this, to understand how they look after their customers, what their customer success strategy is, how often they talk about their roadmap for success, not the product roadmap, the customer's roadmap for success, how often they meet with their success manager. I think it was ServiceNow that famously were the first in the service management industry to start talking about CSMs, but they're everywhere now, right? Pretty much every vendor has them. And again, it's tied in with a subscription model. It's tied in with SaaS. It's tied in with encouraging adoption. Everybody wants it. We should get some CSMs on here, Barclay, to have a chat sometime. I think it's a really interesting.
Would be interesting. The conversation happened prior to the we're leaving conversation.
Yeah, which the vendors don't want that, not only because they lose the income, but it's very expensive. It's expensive to fight to retain a customer. It's distracting. It takes you off doing new innovative things because all your efforts on escalations, it's all on an unhappy customer meeting. It's all on we dropped the ball. We've got to recover the situation. That costs time and money that could be spent fixing bugs, introducing new features, innovating. So nobody really needs to be there.
That innovation thing also depends on having the bandwidth to do it, I guess, and the not just the desire to do it, but the capability to do it. Just to sort of round the conversation a little bit, I mean, what do we think? Ian, I'll ask you first in terms of, like for this new innovation that you described earlier on in terms of the decks, agentic decks, fixing things completely automatically. What do you think the vendor or some of the vendors need to do just to make sure that those kind of things really take hold that isn't happening.
Yeah. We touched on one of them, which is trust. We touched on both of them. So here are the two things I'd say on this. One is reputation and trust is very important. So good references, good stories, good examples of, hang on, this is real. And this isn't just somebody's vision. What a wonderful thing. Let's pretend it's real, but actually we haven't built it yet. You need to make sure this is real, and people need to know it's real, and there need to be real stories of real success. You build that trust. The second point is the on-ramp that we talked about, because it needs to be easy for people to get to that value. It doesn't have to be incredibly super easy, but it needs to be easy enough that the people that want to can get there. They shouldn't have barriers to success. It should be possible to get there. And then you should hear the stories of their success.
Now, the word easy is an interesting one, because I'm reminded of how the tool market has shifted over the last few years, whereby you might get some AI capabilities for free, but then there are other things that you have to pay for. To me, that can be one of the biggest barriers. I know if you go down the route of talking about cost versus value, and it costs you a lot less than what you'll save, and therefore it's a no-brainer. But with traditional budgeting, it can be difficult for customer organizations. You take that thing that's going to save them a lot more than they pay for it. So for me, that would be one of the most significant barriers to them adopting this technology that's going to make their life easier, make customers happier, all that stuff, save them money. So it'd be interesting to see how that's costed in, or what the financial model is, whether you can take it and not be the next thing's customer. I'm assuming you have to have next thing and an IT service management tool for everything to work, rather than next thing doing some of the core ITSM stuff. So it's going to be an additional cost, maybe on an additional cost to what you're already paying.
I can't and shouldn't comment in detail on that, but I don't think it is the case that you have to have a ticketing tool behind it.
Okay. But the organization will probably have a ticketing tool. I'm saying it doesn't replace the existing ticketing tool.
No, it complements.
So to me, that would be, I agree on the trust, but that easy word.
Yeah, easy.
Tasing word story, but financially difficult to pay for or to justify.
When you're talking about easy there, it also made me just think that actually, because we're still talking about the ease of new stuff and the ease of new innovation stuff, I think there's something more fundamental than that behind that, which is a lot of the more kind of standard requirements to make a service management tooling work in terms of people, and how we get people to maybe change the way they work slightly, and onboarding of tools. I mean, there's kind of fundamental stuff that is common across all the products and across all the verticals. That have we thought about what data we want to get out, what kind of information reports we want to get out? Can we visualize that in some way? Have we had some discussion about how we're going to measure things, what our organizational data is going to look like, how we're going to define the organization, just those core things that will give us better data and better capability to have good reporting coming out. And if we're talking about the demonstrating value, then it's usually something about the outputs. So the inputs have got to be defined. So I think it's even a lot more basic than just how we take on the next new shiny innovation. I think actually the core stuff in the background, which we probably need to feed the industry better on from the center, absolutely, so that the practitioners understand that. But again, the vendors, I think, should be more in tune with that, not just in their own, this is our model and this is how it works, and there's lots of different flavors of that. So that would be my thing that I would want to see, is just more simple, clear guidance on what you need to do to make it work.
And so I took that from your very long description there, Barclay, as well. The outputs are really important, but to prove the value, to measure that it's working, to show that it's working. It's possible for these things to be invisible. And then the trouble with invisible is people forget that it's working and adding value. They think, oh, it's not doing anything useful. So it's
become the norm, well, we've got that now, and it's like, yeah.
So actually being a bit noisy, being a bit visible, having good outputs that people can refer to and see, oh, this is working. That's important.
But to Barclay's point, to me, a good example would be, this net thinks, try to say it, next thing Spard, can you say it? Spard sounds really good. But you are, again, this is me being cynical. You're going to get an organization that doesn't necessarily apply the necessary level of vigor to adopting it. And it goes off half-baked. People think this doesn't work. And then people don't use it, or people aren't inclined to want to use it, and they'll want to call the help desk or email the help desk or use ChatGPT or whatever they want to do. They'll want to circumvent something that is fundamentally beneficial for them. And this is, I guess it's sort of the conversation that the Barclay and I were having earlier on. It's getting those foundations right or basics right, such that customer organizations can really benefit from all of these wonderful things that ITSM tool vendors or their partners are bringing onto the market that are ultimately going to make lives easier, cost less, end users happier, businesses more successful. All of these things are there, but it's trying to work out which part of the bridge is broken and fix that such that we can we can all reap the benefits of all of these inventions or innovations from the clever people within vendors.
And there was a great phrase that used to be used by actually a sales leader in a service management vendor who used to say, you're too busy fighting with bows and arrows to take the time to unpack the machine gun. Because the day today is...
Is that one of Pat's?
Well, no. But it's that concept of you're too busy just spinning wheels to make things better, to address the bigger picture. You're so focused.
You do that a lot. I always remember something Ivan McFarlane said, and this was to do with tool selection, funny enough. And it was, if you ask the wrong questions, you'll get the wrong answers. To me, it's all of a similar thing, really, that if we're not focused on what we need, why we need it, what we need to do to benefit from it, we probably always kind of struggle. And when we look at the level of IT service management churn that we've had for, I want to say, last 20 years, it's probably gone on before that, but I've only recognized it for the last 20 years.
It's a good 30 years. I mean,
yeah.
The first thing I ever did was, when I came over to the dark side, was I wrote a report, SDI now, on the market at that time. And a lot of the vendors still there, and not all of them. But at that time, I remember thinking, my goodness, there's way too many of those. Surely this is going to consolidate. I think we got something like 100 replies even then, because we sent it was based on a survey. And it's like, how many times more are there now? So it keeps on growing. It's unbelievable. Do we need a good tool?
As to your point, Barclay, I think a lot of, I want to call them venture capitalists, that's probably the wrong term, but people who provide money to people who create software have seen what ServiceNow did, and they want to be part of that. So I think if you're creating a software or software as a service in the ITSM space, you're going to get people to back you, because if you've got the right, coming back to pitch, if you've got the right pitch, they think they're going to make a lot of money out of you or with your help.
The market's big enough that there's room for lots of players as well.
It's big enough because of the churn as well, that if we had a more stable status quo, I'm trying to work out whether this is logical or not, whether we would see fewer newer market entrants. We probably see, maybe the logic is that it would be harder to displace the status quo. In the same way, if you go back to, well, I think ServiceNow started selling in 2004, and by 2008, they were at something like $13 million revenue, which is a bit different to where they are now.
But they weren't from a stand. I mean, as a company, they were from a standing start, but a lot had come from what was Peregrine, and they had that background and the knowledge market and the contacts and all that already. So it wasn't quite a completely new entrant. But I suppose, I mean, I would never want to say that we shouldn't have new vendors coming in and new innovations and new ideas.
I think it is good.
It's such a spread. I mean, I always kind of go back to, Don's company at Marvel, because he was basically a consultant, and he was interested in technology, and he was involved in writing ITIL, and he built the software. And his approach and their approach was always the right way around from that point of view. They looked at it from a kind of consultancy perspective. They didn't have any of the marketing money or the scale or, the development capacity to really be able to keep up. But they did a pretty good job for quite a long time before they ended up having to change. But that approach to me was always, and when you engaged with them and one or two others like them, you would get we need to start with the data and the services structure, your data, what outputs do you want, and it's like thinking it like that rather than let's just get the management in and start working, see what happens.
Yeah, I disagree with that at all, Barclay. I mean, you'll know, because I know your DNA is in many of the RFP documents that are sent out today.
I think coming back at me, one time I worked for a client and I simplified their RFP, and then I went back a week later and said, we found this one on the internet, and so and it was like double the size of it, and it was one of mine from 20 years before. It was like really annoying. Okay, final thoughts on one simple one would be, what other innovations do we think we'd like to see, and what would make them successful? Ian?
Yeah, well, if I knew the answer to what other innovations we'd like to see, then
what do you think's important to improve there?
Let me perhaps respond in a different way. I think innovation is really important for the industry. I think it should always be encouraged. Not every innovation is a success, but change only comes from innovations. And what's now available with the technology is where we started this whole conversation today. There's some startling things coming out, potentially making a big difference. So I would encourage innovation. Where it goes, I don't know. Although my personal one, I always love voice conversation interaction, spoken interaction, more than typed. But that's just me. So who knows where things go.
But you're very well spoken, Ian. And imagine when Jane trying to understand me, or even Steve. We're both kind of northern types.
Yeah, I really struggle.
Ian's a bit like Jarvis in the Marvel films, isn't he? He's got that.
I don't know how to respond to that. What's your answer then, Stephen? What do you think?
A, I'm not smart enough, and B, I think the technological innovation is happening anyway. So I would just be a drop in the bigger pool. What I think we need at innovation, where I think innovation needs to be focused, and this is what Barclay and I were talking about earlier on, is helping customer organizations to get the most out of the innovations that their ITSM tool vendors are bringing on board. It's scope for innovation there. And it comes back to your bows and arrows and machine guns point of earlier, that I've thought, I want to say long and hard, but that's probably overrating the point. Now, I've thought a lot about this, and I know I've been part of the problem. I remember writing something for a vendor 10 years ago, and it was the 50 key things to look for in an IT service management tool. Then something more recently, try not to have more than 20 things that you need from an IT service management tool. But I'm looking in the wrong place. I'm looking at the tool rather than looking at the people who want to benefit from the tool. So I think the innovation that we need is around the people and the organizations and getting that necessary foundation such that you can take advantage of Spark or anything else. So that's where I would like to make the innovation.
That's really interesting.
Great. That's a really good point to end on. Thank you very much. Right. Well, that was a really good chat. We went from grumpiness and excitement and back again, and ended up with some good advice for the industry. Stephen, how do people get hold of you? How do they contact you?
I'm on LinkedIn. Don't really use X these days like a lot of people. You can go to ITSM.tools, the website, and use the contact form in lots of different ways. I'm relatively easy to find.
Lots of good stuff on ITSM.tools, absolutely. Thank you for that. Ian, I know you're absolutely bursting to ask Stephen an awkward and difficult and unusual question.
I really struggled to think of one, and the one I've come up with is kind of a weak and pathetic end to what was a very good podcast, I think. But there we are. Today's question for you, Stephen. Given a choice, would you have a cup of tea or a cup of coffee?
Coffee. Do I need to explain why?
Yes.
Because I like to put syrup in it.
Oh, syrup in coffee
I
makes it...
know Barclay pulled a face then, but I should add my taste buds are completely broken. So I could put sweetener in a cup of tea. Well, actually, I could take a cup of tea as it is, but get the non-sugary syrup in a coffee. My taste buds like that. I have to do a double shot of it, but
yeah, and that makes it really thick and viscous, a bit like pitch, where we started. Thank you very much. Drum roll, please.
Yes, we've just completely imploded in ourselves. Yeah, we rounded off with the pitch experiment, so I'll leave it there. It'll be sooner than the next drop when we come back on with the next episode, but for now, thanks very much. Thank you, Stephen. Thank you, Ian. And we'll see you again soon on the Enterprise Digital Podcast.